Hello, I'm Morin, pronouns they, them, and I'm a software development manager at Industry Dive. And today I'm going to talk about crafting your own code assessment to get the most out of your technical interviews. So why am I talking about this? Well, hiring is hard. It's a buyer's market in tech. It's difficult to get qualified candidates in for interviews and even harder to get them on the job. So in order to help with this, we need hiring practices that are equitable and fair. We want to make confident decisions about who we offer jobs to so that we feel like we're making the right decisions for ourselves and for candidates at the end of the day. And we want to sell ourselves to candidates. We want them to feel confident and excited about making a decision on us. And as we know, code test tools are here to help, or are they? So a classic way to get good information out of a technical interview is to use a code tool. It's usually a hosted solution which presents users with a set of code challenges, which they solve by submitting code directly to the tool's platform. They're meant to provide impartial data about a candidate's technical aptitude. They tend to provide data points like how correct their answer is, how quickly they completed their answer, how likely it is that they plagiarized their answer, and some of them even replay a candidate's keystrokes so you can watch them code. And as a hiring manager, what information does this actually tell me? Well, correct according to whom? The last I checked, there's never one correct answer to a code challenge. How quickly they completed it? Do I care about this? I don't know. I don't time my engineers here. And how likely they plagiarize their answer? Well, when I'm coding, a lot of what I do is Googling syntax and copying snippets from Stack Overflow. So I think the ability to find the correct answer from those results is a skill that's more important to me than having a dictionary of syntax in your brain. On the other hand, what I would actually like to have out of a code test as a hiring manager is to find out what's your process for solving code problems. How do you communicate your solutions? Do you ask questions? Do you ask for help if you get stuck? And can you work in a technical stack that's similar to what we work with here? And I can imagine that as a potential candidate, what this is telling me is my work here is going to be graded based on unknown criteria. I'll be under pressure to output fast, and I'll be on my own, or this employer doesn't think I should Google things or ask for help, or even worse, that they're not going to trust me. And I can imagine that what I would want to know from a code assessment as a candidate is what kind of work will I be doing? How will I know if my solution is good? What's the technical environment? What if I don't have an answer or I get stuck? And how are my colleagues going to communicate with me? Furthermore, I don't want hiring tools to be intimidating or create barriers. I want hiring tools that support the welcoming environment that I try to create on my team. I don't want code assessments to be impartial. I actually want to be able to customize them, and I want them to be informative. And I don't want them to be standardized. I want to be able to meet candidates where they're at and have a conversation with them. So what to do? At Industry Dive, we were frustrated with our third-party code test tools, and it was budget time. So we had to make a decision about whether or not we were going to go forward with another round of hiring with an off-the-shelf product. And like any good engineer, I saw this as a problem that I could solve myself, and I think you can too. What I proposed to my manager, and by proposed, I mean I built the thing and then asked permission afterwards, was a mix of a sort of take-home assignment and a code challenge that would actually look a lot like our main application. Where can you start? So I knew that I wanted to build something that would be custom and be uniquely Industry Dive and not just fit into our interview process, but elevate it. So to figure out what to build, I knew I wanted something that would be meaningful and accurate and realistic and easy. So to make it meaningful, I would ask, what exactly do you want the test? What exactly do you want to test for in order to get the most out of your process? Ideally, this should come from your job description. So are you looking for familiarity with specific technologies? Are you looking for the ability to debug, to design features? Are you looking for specific code style, ability to communicate with stakeholders, things like that, to make it accurate? This is important to effectively communicate to candidates what exactly the job will technically look like. So ideally, this information can come from your own technical stack and the typical work that you do day to day. So for industry dive, that looks like working in Django, using Git, comprehending criteria from tickets, and communicating code to other engineers through merge requests. For senior architects, it can also be communicating feature designs, and it can be providing feedback to other engineers by giving code reviews. To make it realistic, we want to effectively communicate to candidates what the development process is like, not just what the technology is that they're going to be looking at. So try to mimic the type of work you do as closely as possible. For us, that's a mix of bug tickets, it's some feature updates and some new requests. Mimic your development processes as closely as possible. So for us, that looks like pick up a ticket, write some code, make a merge request, have a code review, and then make adjustments to your code based on that code review. And then finally, make it easy. How can you best support candidates and your hiring staff during this process? The big caveat to this whole thing is that whatever you end up building, you and your team has to maintain. So try to make it easy for yourselves. For us, a Django app hosted in Git is a pretty simple solution to this. Depending on the technology that you use, it might not be that easy, but some things that can help smooth it out. A specific email alias for communication. Can you provide a single source for setup and run instructions? For instance, a README or maybe a landing page at a simple URL. Are there different requirements for different positions or job levels? How might you easily handle this? Perhaps different versions of your tool, or perhaps different settings that you can run it under for different positions. And what we landed on is an app that I call Wavepool. So this is a Git template repository of a Django web application. It's very simple. It has an instruction page, and it has a front page and news post pages that actually look a lot like our main news post product. So candidates get sent a link to this template repository. They follow the README to make their own individual repository from it. And then depending on if they are a senior engineer candidate or a regular engineer candidate, they just run it with the settings that we send them in the instructions. For regular interviews, they'll get some front end and some back end bugs to fix and a CMS feature request. So they simply do their code changes and make a merge request right back into their own repository, and then have a conversation with our hiring engineer about it. And then for senior engineer, same thing. It's just a different set of prompts. They get a feature request, they get a merge request to review themselves, and a feature request to design a plan for. And then same thing, it all goes back into their own repository, and then they talk to a hiring engineer about it. Here's just some screenshots of what it looks like. A simple standard Git README with requirements and the installation and run instructions, and then next steps for the candidates. And then we've got a news post landing page that kind of looks a lot like our actual news post site, individual detail pages for each news post, and instruction pages giving them exact details on what to do for each of the code prompts. Some other tips to help along the way: provide clear objectives to candidates. So you might remember from that last screenshot that there is a subheader that said objectives. This is important to clearly communicate to the candidates and to the people who are going to review the assessment afterwards on your hiring team exactly why you're asking them to do each thing. From some examples from Wavepool: demonstrate basic web framework competencies using Django and Python, demonstrate ability to read and comprehend user requests, et cetera, et cetera. And then provide ways to measure success to candidates. This will help answer the question of, how do I know that I've done this right? So give candidates a way to know that their solution is acceptable. For Wavepool, since it's a Django app, it has tests built into the framework, and each code prompt has a specific test that they can run to tell if their solution is acceptable. So you can do that. You could write out specific scenarios that illustrate the expected behavior. User stories or Gherkin scenarios are great for that. Or just provide screenshots of what it looks like when it's working so that they can compare. And a big lesson learned from this last round of hiring that we did is that timing is everything. When we launched Wavepool, we were getting great feedback, especially from senior engineer candidates. They seemed to really enjoy the process. But junior candidates were dropping out of the pipeline before even getting to the assessment. So we decided to move it to the last step of our process. And this really seemed to help. It helped us to establish a relationship with candidates early on and kind of start to build that trust at the beginning of the process instead of putting them on the spot and asking them to write code immediately. I think that this reinforced that the assessment is just as much for them as it is for us. It's a way to let them know exactly what the job will look like and give them a chance to really see if they think they would like it. It's not pass, fail, or graded. We're going to have a conversation about it. And like I said, it provides as much information to them as it does to us. So how do you assess an assessment like this that doesn't have some kind of standard grade to it? Pretty simple. Create guides or rubrics for hiring engineers so that they can provide consistent feedback. The feedback should directly address those objectives that you gave to your users that were stated in your code assessment. And it should directly address the job description that candidates applied for. Because at the end of the day, the question that you need to answer is, can this person do the job that we described to them? So here's just some example review guidelines from Wavepool for code exercises. Do they provide code that solves some of the acceptance criteria, all of the criteria? Is the code provided with comments and doc strings? Does it pass the relevant tests? And did they provide all of the information in the merge request? And then for the review exercise, really similar. Did they catch bugs? Did they catch out of scope code? Did they provide suggestions for code quality, for more readable code, et cetera, et cetera? And then same thing for the design exercise, a set of questions that you can ask about each candidate as you go. So some additional resources. If you want to actually check out Wavepool, this is the link for that. And then some good articles from Lead Dev on remote hiring in general and some tips for being mindful of DEI in your hiring processes. And then a couple of articles from GitLab and dev.to about remote hiring and technical interviews. And that's all I have. Thank you for joining me.